Twitter and my Discord real quick as well, right? We're gonna be going over OBS and pretty much everything that goes around that. Okay. So first of all, the main focus of the stream is pretty much gonna just be how to optimize your Twitch, right? This is going to go over how to use your Twitch if you have like lower end hardware, if you don't have exactly the highest bit rate in the world, or like if your ISP kind of sucks, any problems regarding low end hardware, bit rate, all that other stuff, I'll pretty much be explaining here, as well as sending links in the chat. So yeah, okay. So Haru will probably be asking questions so that I have stuff to answer. I have a document which I will share with everyone in a quick second. Let me just post this real quick on Twitter. But I have this document which I will be sharing at the end of the stream, which has pretty much everything we're gonna go over. At the start of the stream, I'm pretty much gonna first of all tell everyone the difference between the Streamlabs and Streamlabs OBS. I mean, Streamlabs and base OBS. Streamlabs is basically a bit more of a user-friendly version of OBS. It's slightly more stripped down. However, it does benefit from being easier to pick up in general, since a lot of stuff is already set up, and you don't have to worry too much about, hey, this specific setting right here, right? However, a lot of this stuff will still apply. So if you are using Streamlabs OBS, don't worry. I'm sure you'll find something that might be useful for you. Okay, so first of all, the first thing I kind of want to show everyone, right, is that there's this setting called bandwidth test mode in OBS, and I am pretty sure it is also in Streamlabs OBS, right? Oh shoot, I forgot to change the title. I swear I did everything else. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm a bit of a scatterbrain at times, but okay. OBS.
Hey, Toys.
Yeah.
Quick question. Would you mind sharing your stream to the Discord as well too?
Oh yeah, I don't mind as well. I don't mind at all. Just chatting. Just chatting should be the category for this, right?
Yes. I mean, like, share screen, like, so
okay.
the Discord chat can see as well.
I'm gonna share my screen.
Thank you.
Right. Here we go. Workshop VC spam. Share the screen real quick, and there we go. Everyone can see the screen now. Thank you for the 500 bits right there. Okay, so first of all, the most useful feature I will probably be showing here, right? Especially if you have very low bandwidth options, right? Is under stream, right? There's this thing called enable bandwidth test mode, right? We're not gonna do it right now. However, what it does do, right, is it allows you to kind of stream to your Twitch without notifying and without showing your audience any footage or anything of the sort, right? And pretty much what this allows you to do, right, is you can test how stable your bandwidth is, how much your average bit rate is, and all that other stuff, which might be very useful if you're worried, am I gonna be able to upload or output video at X amount of kilobits per second, right? If you click this, right, it will give you a prompt which basically says, hey, you're planning on streaming in bandwidth testing mode. If you're planning on doing like an actual stream, turn this off, right? It's found right under here, and it is very useful. And yeah, okay, and once you have that, right, you can go to this site called inspector.twitch.tv, right, which is actually related to Twitch itself, right? And it will allow you to see exactly how much bandwidth you're using and like how much bandwidth you're uploading to the Twitch servers, right? As well as seeing streams from the past which don't include this bandwidth mode, right? This is crazy useful, right? Because like if I go to one of my past streams, right, for example, the one from July 13th, 2021, right, you will see that, hey, my bandwidth is fairly stable. It drops to around, 5,000, 4,700 around there, right, and up. And you can see all these stats and all these numerics, right? And you can see how this goes. This part especially will be more focused on Twitch. However, you can just swap your thing to a Twitch account, do your bandwidth testing mode real quick, right? And that should be more or less applicable to YouTube. Of course, they have different server locations and everything else, right? But you can use this to just kind of like, look at how good your internet is or how stable your internet is, right? This is also very useful if you have like very unstable internet, right? Like if your internet goes up and down constantly, or other factors of that kind, right? If let's say you're using this program, right, and you see that your bandwidth constantly drops down to like 3,000, right? You might not want to stream at 6,000 then. If your bandwidth is like constantly like fluctuating, right, just find out where it regularly fluctuates down to and just put your bandwidth around there. And that should fix most, if not, all bandwidth issues, as long as this is considered. Of course, inside of Twitch, Twitch's dashboard, right, you'll also see how good your bit rate is and how stable it is, right? It says live, excellent, live, unstable, live, everything else. You kind of want to just have a quote unquote excellent stream quality, because otherwise, your viewer's gonna have stream lag. Your viewers are gonna have like other problems with that. They're gonna buffer even if they have good internet and everything else. If you're doing this on YouTube, right, for you, especially Jay-Z and Abraxas, right, what I would do here, right, is I would quickly go into here, swap your service to Twitch real quick, click enable bandwidth testing mode, right, and then just stream there for like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, however long you want to test it for, right? And then by using that, you can go to your inspector.twitch.tv, right, and you can see how good or how stable your internet is, right? Of course, it's gonna also change on a variety of factors as well, right? For example, let's say, hey, my parents are, streaming like a movie downstairs at 4K, right? I'm probably gonna have a bit more unstable bandwidth, right? And that's why if you do know how fast your bandwidth is, you might want to add an extra buffer zone, right? This extra buffer zone will make sure that even if your internet drops slightly, it won't be as much of an issue as it would be otherwise. I know that my internet's fairly stable at 6,000. However, of course, there are a few caveats to go with that as well. For example, if let's say when you're going on Twitch, right, or YouTube and other services, right, there's this thing called downscaling, right? I have 1080 60 FPS right now. I can't downscale. That's because affiliates get priority, normal streamers don't get priority, and partners are pretty much guaranteed this, right? So that means that if I'm streaming on 6,000 kilobits per second and I don't win that lottery, right, quote unquote, you won't be able to watch my streams if you don't have enough download speed, which means that if you want the highest growth in the world, you probably don't want to be streaming at 6,000 kilobits per second, because that will cut out a swath of your potential viewer base. There's considerations for everything, but that is the main consideration here. A TDLR of that section, click this, enable bandwidth testing mode, and then by going to twitch.inspector.tv, I'll just put in inspector.twitch.tv, right? You can use this site to kind of just test how your bandwidth is going. This is for every other stuff. You guys can click that in there. I'll post it in workshop VC spam real quick. And I'll read some of your questions from the chat and everything else right now. Okay, checking out the chat. Is there any way to get OBS to register an encoder? Ever since the last Windows update, it didn't recognize any of the encoders, therefore is not letting me recognize or stream. I am not entirely familiar with that answer. I don't know if anything I have can apply to that. Right now we're having a fairly, beginner-friendly stream, so if I can, I'll try to find an answer for you after for that. My ho yoma. I'll reach back out to you once I find a definitive answer for that. Okay, now we're gonna go to the second part of this. We're gonna be talking about encoders and what the settings really mean. This is pretty much gonna just be mostly just about which rate control and which encoder and everything you can use for your hardware, software, and everything else. I use the encoder called NVIDIA ENVtubers, right, which is NVIDIA's default encoder, right? That's because I have a NVIDIA graphics card. Not all NVIDIA graphics cards support this, especially the older ones. However, most recent ones should more or less support this. Okay, so honestly, if you're gonna use this, you need dedicated software. So if you do have a NVIDIA chip, you can search it up by going to system, right? System information, right? And then you can see what graphics card and everything you have. Once you know that, right, then just search up, can this chip use the NVIDIA encoder, right? And what this pretty much does is it's a hardware encoder, which means that it has a hardware chip which is dedicated to encoding, which means that while you're using this, you're not going to get as much performance drop to your games, your streams, and everything because you have this chip. Not everyone has this, of course. Some people have other graphics cards. Some people don't even have graphics cards, and that's totally fine because there are software encoders and there are CPU encoders as well, which we will get to. The other two encoders, right, are let me go to my guide right here. Are the QuickSync H264, right, which is Intel's encoder, right, which is very, very efficient from what I have heard, right, and also is very good for low-end hardware, right. The one caveat to that, however, is that if you're using this, you might get a quality drop on your streams, especially if you're at a lower, bit rate upload, right. And then there's the X264, which is kind of default, which pretty much everyone uses, right? The X264 is the default encoder on Twitch for a reason. It has a very high, quality. It pretty much works on everything because, it's just a software encoder, so you don't need dedicated hardware, right? And in general, it should work for most purposes. However, if your CPU is getting overloaded, right? For example, like you're playing Minecraft, which uses a lot of CPU, right? Then the X264 might be overloaded, and that might end up in frame drops and everything else, right? You can tell if you're getting frame drops by either watching your own stream on another tab, and or looking at your drop frames and your frame rate right here. You can see that my frame right now is running at 60 FPS on my computer, right? And I'm not getting any drop frames. That means my internet seems to be fine right now, and everything else. There are a lot of options, for example, rate control and everything else of this sort, which I will get to real fast. But the basics is if you have an Intel, CPU, you might want to look into the QuickSync if you have really low end hardware. Like if your computer is like 5-6 years old, you might want to look into the QuickSync, right? If it can't run the normal encoder. If you can, run this normal encoder, you might want to run the X264 if you don't have, a NVIDIA chip.
A lot of people here.
Or you might want to optimize the other thing right there. Okay. I'll just check to see if there's any questions real quick. And then I'll get to the next section where we'll go through all these options and kind of tell you what CBR means, what CQP means, and everything else of the sort. Okay, no questions in chat right now. I'll see you another time, Kira. Thank you for checking in. There doesn't seem to be any questions right now, so I'll continue. Oh, okay. Hades has a question. Does profile change affect CPU when using ENVec? It shouldn't have enough impact for you to notice. I don't believe it does have any impact when you're on NVIDIA ENVec because that's mostly a GPU encoder. So most, if not all, the impact for profile change right here, which I'll get to later, will be on your GPU. At least that should be how it works based off of everything I've read, since NVIDIA ENVec is a hardware chip which is focused on your GPU. There we go. Okay, next section right here. Next section. Let me pull up my notes. Okay. Yes. Did someone say something? No. Okay. Okay. There is a small quality drop from NVIDIA ENVec and QuickSync when you're especially at a low bit rate. So if you can run X264, right? But you don't have enough bandwidth to upload high bitrate videos, right? You might want to run X264 instead. There's each one is better at certain things, but honestly, if you're running at high bitrate with good hardware, most of these encoders will have comparable quality. It's just when you're going really low end that the difference starts to show. If you're worried about the drop in quality from ENVec and QuickSync in comparison to the default X264, that's only noticeable if you're going to the very low bit rates, and even then it's negligible. I'm gonna pull up this thing right here called encoder.twitch.tv, right? Twitch has official settings or official recommendations for your encoder specs and your bit rate and everything else for you to use. I'm pretty sure this is mostly focused towards, OBS and other programs which are very mainstream. But if you want to look into this stuff on your own, you can kind of look into this. There we go. And then into my chat as well. I have to post this stuff everywhere, you know? I have to post this stuff everywhere. But, wait, there we go. There we go. Those should be, like, a good guide you can look for, like, hey, I want to stream at 1080 60 FPS, right? That will tell you about how much bitrate you have. However, as Twitch says right here, right, somewhere around here, I remember reading it somewhere around here, right? If you're doing an art stream, or if you're doing another type of stream of like similar, like, you know, nature, where you're not like, changing your frames like every second, right? Like, you're not playing an FPS game, you're not playing like, adventure game or whatever, right? You're just doing art, you're just like reading through pages, all that stuff. You'll probably be able to do a bit less bitrate here. Okay, TDLR for that section. Twitch has these things. If you're interested, look into these links right here. Each encoder has different strengths. QuickSync is very efficient. NVIDIA is for NVIDIA chips, and X264 is the quality focused thing. However, it might be a bit more intensive on your chip. It's mainly CPU focused as well. Check this link out. If you're doing content which has less updates in general, you won't need all 6,000, right? If, let's say, you're streaming at 720 60 FPS, you might not need 4,500 if you're doing an art stream, right? If you're doing an art stream, you might only need 1,000, 1,500. However, that is based off of use case, and if, you're planning on playing a more intensive game, which has like a lot of graphical updates and everything, then you might want a bit higher bit rate. Especially if, like, let's say you're gaming and everything else, right? A lot of game streamers, right, like FPS streamers and everything of the sort, right, will actually run at a lower resolution and a lower FPS, however, have the same bit rate, right, because of how many updates they're showing, and that just helps with quality in general. Okay, next thing. Why would I want a lower bit rate, right? The maximum bit rate on Twitch is 6,000, and I don't believe YouTube has as a low of a, maximum. However, I'm not too sure about that. If anyone can, speak in what the maximum bit rate for uploading to YouTube is, this is just a general range, because Twitch, right? If you look at my Twitch.inspector data, right, my bit rate actually goes way above 6,000, 6,500, sometimes gets 7,000, etc., right? Normally, if you're streaming on Twitch, 6,000 is the highest you want to go. However, if, let's say, your viewers are, only able to stream 4,500, kilobits per second download, right? They're not going to be able to see your stream. So if you want maximum growth, you might want to lower that. If you can't run, 6,000 kilobits per second upload, right? You might want to lower that. And all those other reasons, right? And with lower kilobits per second, you want to lower your resolution or your frame rate as well, right? Because if I'm running at 1080 60 FPS, right, but I'm only streaming at 3,000 kilobits per second, right, and I'm playing a very intensive game, what will happen is anytime my camera moves, it starts pixelating, and that's kind of not what you want. But I'll digress. Look at this guide, very useful. Okay. To the third topic, I guess, the specifics of all these options right here. Most of the time, if you're streaming, you'll want CBR, right? Because constant bitrate makes it so that your bitrate isn't constantly fluctuating. Because if, let's say, I'm just sitting at this screen, right? There's not many updates. It's still gonna be 6,000 bitrate. If I'm like playing FPS, it's still gonna upload 6,000 kilobits per second, right? That's going to be constant, and what that means, right, is that if, let's say, I'm using variable bitrate, right, VBR, and I'm just sitting still, right, it will lower the bitrate, and then once I start moving, it will actually have to catch up, meaning the first few seconds when I'm just, like, twirling around in game or whatever, right, it's going to have, like, a moment of pixelation, right? If you want the highest quality with, consistency, CBR is kind of your best friend here. This is what most streamers actually suggest that you use. However, of course, if you're interested in everything else, I do have explanations for most of the other rate controls here. Rate control will actually have different, different type of rate controls. For example, in my document right here, right, I don't have CRF under this list, right? That's because it can be only found in the X264, I believe. So we'll be going over every encoder's rate controls, or at least the most notable ones, okay? CQP is mostly for recording. You don't really want to do this while you're streaming. A lower number, because it's on a 1 to 30 scale, will mean that it has a higher quality, right? So if let's say you have 1, right, you're gonna be at pretty much lossless, right? And if you're at 30, it will be very compressed video. CBR, right, VBR is variable bit rate, right, which basically tells your computer, hey, look at how many pixel updates are on my screen right now, right, and then upload around the amount that I would need onto Twitch, onto YouTube, wherever you're streaming, right? The one caveat for this, right, as I said before, is that if, let's say, you're going from a still image, right, to a lot of action, a lot of movement, right, you're gonna have some pixelation here and there. This is probably not what you want. If let's say you're really worried about, hey, I can't like, burn through all my data, right? Or if your internet provider can only allow you so much, like, gigabits or whatever, right? So much upload, right? This might be a better option, because when you're not using it, you're not really using your bandwidth. But when you are, there's that. This might be good if you're just trying to conserve how much data you have and all that stuff, but I still wouldn't recommend it a lot of the time. Lossless you'll pretty much never use, because the file size is just so big that it sometimes crashes OBS, it sometimes crashes the programs you're using, and at the same time, Twitch and YouTube will both already compress your videos, right? So if you're streaming towards YouTube with lossless, right, it's still not going to be lossless. There can be an argument for this if you're recording, right? If you're recording, there's an argument for it. However, even then, I would not run at lossless, because it's gonna crash my programs, it's gonna fill my hard drive and everything else. CBR most of the time is the way you want to go. And there's one that I want to go over that isn't in NVIDIA ENVec, right? And that's called CQP or CRF. And this goes from a 1 to 51 scale instead. And 1 is the worst quality, 51 is the highest quality, right? So pretty much CQP, but upside down, So CRF is that upside down on a 1 to 50 scale. Yeah. Okay. So that's, oh, okay. Thank you for that, Jason. Jason has gone in and told us that the max for YouTube is 51,000 upload. You'll pretty much never really need that. But if you want to stream at that bitrate, I won't stop you. However, it might cause some issues. Still, only suggest around 4,500, 4,000, 5,000 if you're, on Twitch, on YouTube, everything else. Maybe 6,000, maybe underneath that if you can't run that, right? And yeah, TDLR, use consistent bitrate, find out how much bitrate you have to upload by using this enable bandwidth testing mode, and you're golden, right? Okay, keyframe interval. What are keyframes, right? If any of you guys already know what keyframes are here, I'm not gonna, you guys won't really need this, but basically what a keyframe is, right, is that that is whenever your encoder sends a full frame, right? So every 1 second I can make the encoder send a full frame, right? Or I can make it do it automatically. What a keyframe is, right, is that basically encoders don't really send the full frame to Twitch, right? Instead, most of the time they send updates from the last frame, right? So I'm gonna move my window over here. You see how these characters are moving, right? If my encoder was looking at this, right, instead of going, hey, each individual frame of these guys moving, right, it will go, hey, this frame moved up there, right? So instead of, wasting all this space, right, it will be like, this guy moved to the left, this guy moved to the right, etc., right? And that's going to save your bandwidth, that's going to improve quality, right? However, having more keyframes and everything might make your thing look a bit better. I would just keep it at auto, though, because your encoder is probably pretty smart. You don't really need to play around with this unless, you're really trying to optimize your stuff. If you have more keyframes, that's going to be a bit more bandwidth, that's going to be a bit more strain on your system, and all that other stuff. Just keep it at auto, or keep it at whatever your encoder would recommend. A lot of encoders will already recommend settings, so for a lot of this stuff, you can just keep it at the default. Preset right here, right? This will actually optimize your thing a lot. All encoders have this preset thing, right? I'm gonna go back to my document right here, right? You see that there's a profile, right, which is basically your preset here. There's there's a CPU usage preset right here as well, right? That's going to be very useful for in general. If let's say you're planning on low latency streaming, right? You want 1-2 second latency, right? Like just barely any latency, right? Like if you're interacting with your audience like a lot, if you don't want them to have too much latency, these might be good options right here, right? If you want performance, if you want quality, these two, this is the middle ground, right? Max performance, right, will pretty much just say, hey, everything goes into performance. I don't care about latency. I don't care about as much quality as all the other options, right? This is very useful. If you have like low end hardware, right? If you want low end hardware, maybe this, maybe this, maybe this, right? If you're aiming for, hey, I'm doing a super cinematic stream, right, where I'm going over, I'm streaming this movie I made or whatever else, right? You might want to go to quality or max quality. There are other options in other encoders as well, right? For example, in X264, right, there's this thing called cinematic, right, which is basically your high performance, or I mean high quality, right? There's other options of the same sort as well. I actually believe I did go over this in my document. Let me just check. No, it's not that important anyways, but you can probably get what each one's going for. These are pretty much the same for each encoder. I can't actually check the other encoders right now because, I'm streaming. But, yeah. If you are really interested in, like, optimizing this part, you can search up for your specific encoder, and there is a lot of documentation for this stuff, either by the official source and or by, people just telling you on the internet. Profile, right? High, main, and baseline. This is the same terminology for each encoder, right? Every encoder pretty much uses the same terminology, right? This basically tells the computer, hey, you can use this much of your processing power, your GPU, whatever, right, to run your thing. Baseline is probably only if you have really low end hardware, right? For example, hey, I'm using this laptop from like 2000, right? You use baseline. If you're having anything like just a few generations old, right, use main. If you're using something like current generation or very recent, right, high, right? And these are pretty much just going to tell your computer how much of this stuff you can use. And if you like use baseline on a modern computer, that might run into a few issues because your encoder isn't getting as much energy. I mean, not energy, but processing power as it needs. Look ahead right here. Pretty much, this is for the video. I'm not too sure if it's for everything else, but basically it just says that you can let the B frames right here, right, be dynamic and change on their own and everything else. I would these both take a bit more, processing power. And if you hold over them, they will tell you what they mean. You guys can play around with that on your own. GPU, don't touch this. Do not touch this. Because if, let's say, you want to use a different GPU than the GPU you're currently running your screen on, right, it will have to send that to the other GPU, and then any effects for that is negligible. Don't play around with that. And okay, that's everything for the encoders right here. Yeah. Don't play around with this. This is not what you want to play around with. Yeah. What bitrate should you use? I already told you guys about that. Yeah. Okay. And the last thing, right? The last thing which might help you scuff out the last piece of performance, right, is over here in video, right? There's these options for your base canvas and your output, right? Your base canvas is basically this screen right here. You see like where I have all my overlays and everything set in this tiny box right here? That's your base canvas resolution. Everything else that you're streaming to everyone will be either the same ratio or a lower resolution with the same ratio, right? So for example, if I go to 720p or whatever, right, any output which is downscaled will be a lower quality. And if you have a lower resolution, then the bandwidth that you chose will be better for that resolution. For example, if let's say over here, right, where I have the recommended settings, right, if you have 6,000 kilobits per second, right, and you're doing a game stream, you might want to lower the FPS, and then all those will be attributed to all of the settings a bit more, I guess. And like, if let's say you're running at a lower resolution, you don't need 6,000 anymore. You might only need 4,500. If you're running like, a lower FPS stream, you might need even less, right? However, if let's say you're running at a too high resolution and you don't have enough bandwidth, like let's say I'm running at 1080p 60 FPS, right? And I'm only giving it 3000 kilobits per second, right? What this will do, right, is it will mean that for all of the 3000 kilobits per second that I'm uploading, right, they need to deal with every update here. So that means that there will be a lot more pixelation. Anytime I move, it will, start pixelating. Maybe if I stand still for a few seconds, right, it will get crisp and clean again, right? And then once I start moving the camera again, it's gotta go pixelating again. So please use this. I can't, express enough that you don't want like maximum resolution if your bandwidth cannot keep up with it. If you're running at 1080p, but you can only run 3000 kilobits per second, don't do that. Run at 7030 FPS. I mean 720 30 FPS. You guys get what I mean. And yeah, again, super important link, very important link. Normally you wouldn't want to move your base resolution. You would want to change your output resolution, right? But if you really want that last bit of performance, you might want to lower this, right? I suggest just keep it default and maybe lowering this if you want a bit extra quality, like your output, right? But if you really need that performance because your computer's processing too many things, then lower this too. But you want to normally keep them about the same, or at least that's what I would suggest. The downscale filter, right? You see this thing right here that no one understands, right? Basically, if let's say I'm running at 1920 1080 FPS, right? I mean 1080 resolution, right? And my output is at something else from a 16:9 resolution, right? This downscale filter will basically tell you, hey, use this filter, right? Which is basically a program which reinterprets your frames into other frames, right? Lankazos, right, is the best one, right? And then pretty much everything above that is, a lower quality one, right? However, of course, if you're on low-end hardware, you might not want to use Lankaz, right? Because you don't have the performance for that. Of course, if you're not downscaling, right? Notice that my base canvas, right, is the same as my output, right? This doesn't affect you at all. This does not do anything unless you're downscaling. So you don't need to worry about that. Please do not worry about that if you're just running at your default resolution, okay? Or even if you're running at a lower resolution with both of these being the same. Yeah. Okay, common FPS values. This is gonna be your goal for your FPS, right? If you're really high, bit rate, you might be able to go for 60, right? If you're lower bit rate, or if you just can't run as much processing power, right? You might want to go to 30 FPS, right? Of course, right? Everything here is based off of you testing, you playing around with things and seeing what works best for you, right? And at the same time, everything here will take a bit differently, right? If you're running different programs, right? For example, if I'm playing this really intensive game, right? I might want to lower my graphics a bit. I might want to lower my quality settings a bit, right? If I'm running art, right, which probably barely takes any processing power, any resources comparatively, right, to playing cyberpunk, whatever the hell you want to talk about, right? Any high graphics game, right? I might be able to run for something a bit higher, right? Or yeah. But if you you play 2-3 different games which take different resources, like Minecraft, which uses CPU, right? Or what other games uses the GPU more? Pretty much every other game uses the GPU more, right? You might want to swap between encoders. However, a lot of the time you can just find an encoder that works and just ignore it after you finish setting up it for the first time. It's not that scary. I will have a guide that I will send for pretty much everything that we've talked about right here. And yeah, that's a bit of stuff to troubleshoot about OBS. I have a few other tips, like how you can if you're really low on the bandwidth and you don't want to run your thing off of if you don't want to run your thing off of this where you have these options right here, if you don't want to be streaming it to yourself, right? Because I can see my own stream and that will take my download speed, right? If you're really low on what is it, on your upload, right, or your download or your bandwidth in general, right, you might want to pull these out, pop out, right, get this link, and then just put that chat, right? Put that chat box, right over here, right? This web doc, right? If you go to View, Docs, and Custom Browser Docs, right? You can put any website you want onto your OBS, right? And this is one of the strongest things about OBS, right? Because now, if let's say I don't have enough download speed or I don't have enough bandwidth in general, right? I don't need to be running my thing in the background like this and just, hogging up all my bandwidth. I have this thing. And that's it. And also, quick actions is just really nice to have in OBS in general. And yeah, that's my basic troubleshooting guide to OBS or lower end hardware, bandwidth, and everything else. I'll check your questions real quick. Yes, lower as Vince said in the workshop VC spam, right? Lower is better for mobile, right? And there's not really an optimal number. It's based off your audience as well as your computer as well as your all the other setup stuff, right? The resolution I would normally suggest for starting out, right? I would normally suggest for Hades right here, maybe like 720 60 FPS, maybe 1080 30 FPS, right? Because then you're not running at a quality which a lot of viewers can't see, right? There is a barrier for download speed, as Haru said right here. If you're running at too high of an upload speed, some people can't watch you, and that's a real shame, right? Meanwhile, at other times you might just luck out and they can watch you, right? And that might just be really frustrating. So maybe lower it a bit. Should I upload the link again? I'll upload the link again. Please look at this. See what's good for you. I suggest 720 30 FPS, 720 60 FPS. That should be decent for everyone involved. Or 1080 30 FPS, That should work for everyone, right? It's all based on circumstance and everything else. Okay, more questions to look for. Lower is better for mobile? Yes, you are correct there, Vince. 15,000 to 35,000. Yep. Optimize for what you're streaming, what you're playing. If you're an art streamer, right, you don't need 6,000 FPS. You might be able to get by with 3,000 at 1080p. 30. Yeah. Yep. Vince has good recommendations right here. 720 60 FPS, 1080 30 FPS is also good. Encoder profiles tell me which encoders and which features are allowed to use. Oh, I did not actually know that. That's actually very useful. So you might not even need to play around with, hey, is my thing compatible? Thank you everyone for all this stuff right here. I cannot help with that. I don't really separate my stuff for VODs. And if you're getting a VOD off of Twitch, if you're getting a VOD off of YouTube, it's already going to be compressed into one track. If you want to get VODs in multiple tracks, I do know that you have to have separate recordings. However, I'll hand this question over to people with a bit more qualifications. I believe if Haru is here, right? I believe Haru or Fumi should be able to answer how you separate audio tracks a bit better. If you guys may.
Yeah, not a problem. I can chime in real quick here to answer that
Yep.
question. So when you're separating audio tracks for VODs, I
Yep.
would never recommend it doing for streaming just because of the additional processing data you would do it.
Yep.
What I would recommend to do as a professional content creator is to have a separate recording software that has different line tracks. And
Yep.
then through Windows, you'll be able to separate one into your system tracks, which would be recording the audio game. You could separate another one into your microphone track, which will be taking your microphone audio, and the second one will be your Discord communication track, so you can individually lower down your Discord audio if people are talking too much over a certain time.
Yeah.
I wouldn't never do this inside OBS itself, just because of when it outputs, it's the most compressed file ever.
Yeah. Haru here knows what he's talking about. He's very good at this kind of stuff. If you guys have more technical questions about audio tracks and everything, right? I would definitely just ask in the chat, and I'm sure he would be happy to help. But yeah, I'll wait a bit more to see if any of you guys have any questions, right? And
I got a question here. We can just
yes,
just to fill time.
Yep.
You mentioned before about that we're doing a lot of bandwidth testing to see if your computer is able to handle the bandwidth to Twitch server.
Yeah.
But let's say that I'm playing a game. How would I know that would work on my encoder, or it'll make my computer crash? What's the best way to be able to test that before going live?
If you're worried about if you don't have enough bandwidth, you can do the bandwidth test, right? If you are worried about like the encoder itself, you can either record. I'm pretty sure that's gonna be about the same thing, or you could stream to another account which no one follows, because that's always an option. And I've used that a lot to test out if like I'll be able to stream this game if this game's at good FPS and everything, right? Because one of the weaknesses, right? One of the big weaknesses of this bandwidth test, right? Enable bandwidth test, right? That thing right there is that when you're doing that, you're streaming 0 FPS. You're not doing any encoder work, right? And that's not really going to give you a full image of when you're playing this game, right? Maybe try recording it, right? Maybe try streaming to a testing account which no one follows, right? Or even if people do follow it, just be open that you're testing stuff here. I've seen a lot of people test on like their main Twitch account, on their main YouTube account or whatever. That's fine too, but just be worried if someone gets a notification, pops in, and is like, what are you guys doing over here? But yeah. Vince sent a guide here. I would advise you guys looking at that if that's useful. I suppose if I were to separate audio afterwards, I would separate my own mic and Discord audio. I'm not sure if you can separate them after. I'm pretty sure you can only pre-separate them, but I'm not totally sure about that. Yeah, because like if it's everything's on the same track, it's gonna be very hard or impossible to separate. I'm pretty sure. So yeah. Okay. If no one has any other questions, I think that should be a good time to end the stream. If you guys found this helpful, right? Oh, any advice for general tips or for restreaming? The main worry about restreaming, right, is that you're not encoding more, you're actually only uploading more, right? So if you're planning on restreaming to both YouTube and Twitch, right, or like a double streaming or whatever you want to call it, right? If you're planning on doing that, you might get a bit more growth, right? But you'll need the bandwidth to support that, right? For example, if you're struggling at 6,000 or 3,000 bit rate, right? If you're restreaming to both services, right, you're gonna need you're only gonna be able to do 1,500 on each. You're gonna have to have between them, right? If you can easily run 6,000, right, you might be able to run both at 3,000, or you might be able to, even if you have even more, you might be able to run even more. But yeah, I do know that Streamlabs does have a bit more options for restreaming, because it will combine the chats and all that other stuff. Streamlabs might be a good option if you're starting out on restreaming. Oh yeah, there's also there are other tools to test your bandwidth, of course, right? But here, right, on Twitch, Twitch's enable bandwidth test mode, right, you can also pick which server you want as well. However, a lot of the time, I would just recommend using your automatically picked server, because that's very nice. I cannot talk about that because I'm not familiar enough with that. Um, I don't really know if that's definitely the best option in the world, or if there's better options out there. If the site does indeed do what it says, then that's great, I think. But yeah, man, my room's hot right now. My room's hot right now.
Yeah, I think we're starting to pretty much wind down at this point.
Yep.
Toy, do you have any closing statements, any thoughts or that you would like to share before we head off?
Okay, I'm gonna share this document right now. If you guys wanna read over the stuff instead of watching the VOD over, right, or just go at things your own pace, right, I highly suggest looking into this document because I pretty much just put all the information I found right here. There's a few other things that you can probably do on Twitch that might be very useful. There's a few other options here that you might want to look into, like for example, Twitch add-ons, which might let you do more chat options, or maybe even see how much lag you have to your stream, right? Because like Frankerface, for example, I think is very useful because now I can see that my buffer size, right, or my latency to myself, which goes from me to the Twitch server to me again, is 1.66 seconds, right? There's a lot of Twitch add-ons that are built into OBS that might be very useful for you guys. So play around with those. Explore, ask questions, and yeah. People like Fumi here, Fumi, Haru, everyone in the Discord is often more than happy to help if you guys have any questions. I'm also more than happy to help. If you're a new streamer, please, ask questions. It's kind of what you need to do at the start, Not everyone knows everything from the start, and even I, right? Even I, the one teaching you guys right now, right, did have to look through a lot of this stuff, right? because I don't know what what the difference between high, main, and baseline does. I don't know what what the difference between lane costs and like a bunch of the other downscale filters is, right? Um, Oh, and one thing I did forget to say, right? Faster means it uses less of your computer's resources, right? So super fast is going to be a lot better if you have low-end hardware than, than medium, So please, if you're worried about it, it's not for NVIDIA NVEC, but for like, X264, right? If you are worried about how much your hardware is and all that, please go to like, fast, faster, super fast, etc., right? You probably won't need super fast, but faster and everything else, right? Though I completely forgot to say this. I'm sorry, but the faster settings, right, will have a hard time with color updating and all that stuff. But yeah, but like if there's a lot of colors updating on your screen, right, you might not want to be on super fast. This is actually something that Haru taught me because I wasn't totally sure what the difference was on lower things, right? So thank you, Haru, for that. Like Haru is amazing if you like need technical help. Yeah, exactly. Lane here is saying that if all else fails, questions chat is a great resource, right? Scroll down there, see if it hasn't already been answered, and if you can't find your question, please ask. Okay. If you guys,
That was awesome, Toy.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
If you guys enjoyed
Um,
this, please give me a follow or check out the English VTubers Discord, right? Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna end my stream now. Give me a follow. Thank you.